9 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Our next guest is evidence that sometimes the most talented people are the last ones that you find out are talented. Although we've known for a long time. Pastor James Snyder is in the studio. You all know him from, oh my goodness, how many different things do we know of Pastor Snyder from? Sunday Joy is the show you hear on WOCA every Sunday. He is also the pastor of the Family of God Fellowship Church in Silver Spring Shores. He's an honorary Doctor of Letters. So I did say the right name when I said Dr. Snyder. A Doctor of Letters at Trinity College of Florida in Newport Richey. He's an essayist, a columnist, a very talented writer, a comedian at heart, and even in his ministry, he incorporates humor, and an editor and an award-winning author. And we're talking about two books today, The Life of A.W. Tozer, In Pursuit of God, and My Daily Pursuit, Devotions for Every Day. Pastor James L. Snyder, Reverend James Snyder, good morning.
Well, good morning.
Pastor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege and honor to be here.
You're one of the few people with a title that I will always call you by the title.
Really?
It's one of those weird things. I don't know why. I have a hard time calling you James or Jim. You're always Pastor Snyder to me. I don't know why. Is that weird? Do you find that weird?
It makes me want to pass the offering plate, but go ahead.
Oh, it's too funny. So how many books have you written?
Probably about 18.
18?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think 15 of them are based on A.W. Tozer.
Uh-huh. And the small books, how many of those do you have? Are you counting them?
Oh, I don't count them.
Okay.
They're not my serious books.
Yeah, but those are great.
Well, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, you have a whole line of those.
Right. I publish
like a half-inch thick books or something?
Yeah, I publish about 20 a year. 20 chapters in those little books a year.
And are they based on the things we hear on Sunday Joy?
Right. I have a syndicated newspaper column in about 300 different newspapers.
Wow.
And it's a weekly column. And so every year I select 20 of those columns and publish them and then, hand them out. And they're so expensive, I have to give them out. Nobody could afford them, so I just give them out.
And now the new books that we're talking about. Now you had like a coup recently, right, with a publishing deal? Was it last year or something? You had
a couple years ago.
Some real good news.
My agent got a 6-book deal, and then 2 years ago we got another 6-book deal. So it's a 12-book deal. This is the 11th in that series.
Wow.
And I'm now working on the 12th one that will come out sometime next year. And for the first 10, the publishing company, which is one of their main jobs, is doing Sunday school curriculum. And so they're taking the first 10 books and developing them into Sunday school curriculum. So that just expands the ministry of those books. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh, wow! We've never really dug into your past as a child. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Amish country, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and so I never really had any college. I just graduated from high school. In fact, I flunked English, which is kind of interesting.
That's odd. You're a writer, right?
And the English teacher said, if you give me you're not going to pass, he said, but if you give me a poem every week, I'll make sure you pass.
Oh, really?
I wished I had those poems. I think they're probably the most stupid piece of work I've ever done, but it got me through high school, and hey, that was worth it.
So here's a foolish question, or silly, or maybe stupid. Is Amish a religion?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's a kind of a closed community. They look out for each other. They don't have insurance like we would have. If one of their houses or barns burn down, then the whole community gets together and rebuilds it.
Makes sense.
So they look out for each other.
And were your parents Amish?
No. My great-grandmother was Amish, and then she married a non-Amish, and so she was shunned.
Oh,
so I guess I'm part of the shunned generation.
Oh, okay, all right. And when did you decide to take up the ministry? You had a couple of different choices early in your life,
well,
right?
when I was young, I was converted at a young age, and our church had a lot of ministries, nursing home ministries, street corner ministries, and so I started preaching. And I went to a little Bible institute that qualified me to teach in an adult Sunday school class. That's about all it was. And so our passion, I got married, and our passion was to start churches. What we wanted to do was go to places nobody else wanted to go. And so at that point, back in the 70s, nobody was very much interested in church planting. And so we said, well, that's what we want to do. And so we planted churches, and we got a church up, and then we'd always look around, where's there a place nobody else wants to go? And we seemed to go.
So nobody wanted to go to Silver Spring Shores?
Well, it was a dying church. It only had about 15, 20 snowbirds. During the summertime, I think there were 5 people left. I'm not quite sure now, but yeah, I mean, it didn't have any future. So and I saw it as a great opportunity.
And what do we say? What do you say when somebody says, "What's the denomination of the church?"
Well, we are part of the Christian and Missionary Alliance. That's a missions organization. Our main focus is the foreign field, reaching. Of course, we don't call it the foreign field anymore. That's not politically correct. But our focus is to send people, men and women, to countries to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. And our biggest mission field, where we have the biggest congregation, would be the Philippines. And so I haven't heard anything back about what's happening with our people over in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
You know, the great tragedy that's happening over there.
Yeah. You are one of the most dynamic speakers I know. I'm not just saying that because you're in the room. Obviously, you know this, but for our listeners' sake, Pastor Snyder was the pastor at my son Alex's wedding to his wife Jessica, and to Robin's son TJ to his wife Charity. And the commonality, besides you making both of those weddings beautiful, is the fact that they were both videotaped, which means that what you said in the ceremony is forever on there. And it's funny how we hear what you said better later.
Oh, yeah.
It's like at the ceremony itself, you hear it, but you're kind of distracted or whatever.
Well, you know, I could do a wedding ceremony in Pig Latin and nobody would notice. You know?
But afterwards, you listen to what you said. And not only are you a great speaker, but a great writer, and what you wrote for both weddings was outstanding. I mean, so beautiful, just so nice, and the weather was beautiful both days too. So everything was working.
Yeah, it was great.
So if you want good weather, make sure Pastor Snyder's doing your wedding.
I was honored to be part of both of them. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. So let's focus on the books. First, who is A.W. Tozer?
A.W. Tozer was born in 1897, died in 1963, which gives the time frame of his life. He was born in western Pennsylvania in a country farm. He didn't like the country, so they moved into Akron. And it was while he was in Akron that he was walking to work one day in the rubber factory as a teenager and heard a street preacher. And he was converted through that street preacher. And then he began street preaching at the time. And he was part of a denominational church, and the pastor took him aside and said, "Now listen, we think it's nice of you to preach on the streets, but that's not the uppity thing to do, you know." I'm paraphrasing. You got to have an education. You got to have a degree in order to preach. And he was a little disappointed because he went to the 8th grade the first day and came home and told his mom, he said, I think I could learn more on my own. So he was self-taught. He didn't have an education or anything of that nature. So he went down to West Virginia to do some street meetings, and they developed what they called a storefront church at the time. You move into a storefront church. Right. And so he was part then of the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and he was on the ordination track, And so he had to be interviewed in order to be ordained. And after they interviewed him, all of them said, I'm not sure this guy is really qualified. He has no education. We can't see any gifts that he has. And then one of the guys says, well, he really has a heart for ministry. Why don't we just give him a shot? And so they ordained him. And my question is this: I wonder if any of them lived long enough to see this man that they didn't think had many gifts rise to such of fame.
Right.
And so eventually he got into Chicago and the church there. He turned a church that was meeting in a garage into one of the big churches in Chicago at the time. And he was a man who was really focused on God. Back in those days, on the train, they had the Pullman cars, and he would get on the train in Chicago and ride west for 4 hours and meet in and get into a Pullman car. He said it cost extra, but he said it was worth it. And he would spend those 4 hours on his knees with an open Bible before God. And then he'd get that point, and then he would turn around and do the same thing coming back. So he had 8 hours, no interruption, where he was absolutely focused on God. His work that he's most known for is The Pursuit of God, which is a classic devotional. It was published in the 40s. And he was going to go down to Texas to a conference that he was speaking at. He got a Pullman car, and he got in there, and he began writing. And there was a lot of things that was on his mind at this time, some sermons that he had preached. By the time he got to his destination in 2 days, I guess it took 2 days to get there, he had the first draft of The Pursuit of God, which is now a devotional classic. So here was a man who was so utterly focused on God that nothing else really mattered. And the thing that connects with people is he wasn't a denomination. We have Calvinists on one hand and we have Arminians on the other hand. And you can work without one hand, but you can't clap, and he rose above all of these divisionary distinctions, and said that Christianity is not a little club here and a little club there.
Right.
And so he rose above all of that kind of stuff, and he really spoke and ministered to the hearts of people. One of his favorite writers was St. Augustine. And St. Augustine says in his opening book, he says, "Thou, O God, has created us for thyself, and we are restless until we rest in thee." And that sort of summed up the whole life of A.W. Tozer. There was a restlessness in his heart that only God could satisfy. And all of his writings and his speakings and all of that addressed that theme. He died in 1963. I have about 600 of his sermons, and I'm putting them into book form. I often get the question, which is, what would A.W. Tozer say today if he was living? And I remember what my uncle said when someone asked him, what is your favorite pie? And he always said the one I'm eating at the time. And what I would always say is that Dr. Tozer would say today what he said back then. Because what he was talking about back then and preaching and teaching back then was the essentials of the Christian life. Not to flab around the corner, but the essentials. And sometimes I'm working on a sermon, and I'm sitting back and saying, wait a minute. He preached this in 1957. How did he know what life would be like here in 2013?
That's interesting.
Because there are certain truths that never change. And one of his sayings was this: if it's new, it's not true. And if it's true, it's not new, you see. And so if you focus on truth never changes,
I love that.
And so that was the passion of his heart, and he drew people. Most people did not know that he was part of the Christian and missionary lives because he never talked about it.
So I see parallels with you, though. I mean, some of the things you just said in explaining who he was sounds like you.
Well, that's probably because I read a lot of him. I'm not sure.
I don't know. So when did you discover A.W. Tozer, and did your discovery of him lead you to God, or was it the other way around?
Well, I was a Christian, a teenager. In our church in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, we had a retired Moody Bible Institute missionary who was her name was Fanny Diffendaffender. How do you forget a name like that?
Oh, wow.
Don't ask me to spell it.
Yeah, yeah.
Fanny Diffendever. One Sunday, I came to church, and she was there, and she said, Sonny, I don't know if she knew my name, but she called me Sonny. She said, Sonny, here's a book you need to read, and she put it into my hands, and I said, thank you, and I took it home. And the next Sunday, she met me and said, Sonny, did you read the book? How'd you like the book? I said, ma'am, I didn't get around to it. The next Sunday, the same thing. Finally, it dawned on me that if I didn't read the book, I'm going to have to meet this old lady every Sunday that I come to church. And so that week, I said, I'm going to read the first chapter. And then that's I read it, and I was just blown away. As a teenager, I was reading a dead preacher that I didn't think had anything to say to me. I was reading this book that had a lot to say to me and that I could understand. It was not religious jargon, theological suppositions, but rather it was, the title was The Pursuit of God.
Yeah.
And the whole theme of it was, finding God, searching for God. And so that started me. And I'm an obsessive kind of a person. If I like an author, I want to read everything he has. And so I read all of his books. I began to collect the tapes. And then I wanted a biography. And there was one little biography that had one little profile in the first chapter, and the rest were just quotes and so forth.
Right.
And so I said, I began talking to people. If I knew you knew Dr. Tozer, I would be on your case like a flea.
Oh, really?
And so I that developed, and pretty soon I had a biography.
I know you better than I know Dr. Tozer. I know your sermons better than I know his. And I'm wondering if he is the same as you in this regard. If somebody were to ask me about your ministry, I would say, well, Pastor Snyder will talk about the afterlife, life after death. But you also talk a lot about life before death. You really, and a lot of preachers don't do that. A lot of pastors do focus on the salvation after we die. But you also talk about a lot of stuff before we die that is applicable to our lives today.
Right.
So I'm guessing that's true for Tozer as well.
You see, becoming a Christian doesn't mean that you're going to go to heaven. Yes, that's part of it. But if becoming a Christian was only so that you could go to heaven, as soon as you accept Christ, we ought to shoot you. I mean, if that's your philosophy, why live? But you see, becoming a Christian is not just so I can go to heaven. Becoming a Christian is to becoming like Christ, and to live the Christ life, and to show to the world around me the Christ qualities that they really need to know.
That's awesome. I love that. And that is exactly right. That's how we should be living.
I think so, sure.
In fact, I think that's what Jesus meant when he said, believe in me. It means believe in what I believe in.
Right.
So can I ask you one question about the gifts? Many times in the past when we've talked, I've never asked you this. Often wonder, what do you mean by the gifts?
Are you talking about the gifts of the Spirit?
Yeah, it's almost a mystery to me.
Well, Paul talks about it in Corinthians. Talks about the gifts of the Spirit, and I don't have my Bible with me, it's in my truck, but all of those gifts are gifts that the Holy Spirit gives to believers to do the work of the ministry. And we live in a culture today, a religious culture, that focuses on one gift, and you can't do that. It's all of the gifts together make the body of Christ and the ministry of Christ. You can't pull one out. One isn't more important than another. What's more important in your body, your heart or your liver? What's more important?
Right,
So you got to have them all. When was the last time you saw your heart? When was the last time you examined your liver and says, "Oh, I think that's doing okay"? These things are sometimes hidden, but in the body of Christ, these gifts begin to work and manifest themselves. And the ultimate purpose of the gifts of the Spirit is to exalt Jesus Christ. When there is a gift that exalts a man, either they're not using that gift right or it's a false gift. Now, if you were the devil, wouldn't you try to falsify everything that God is doing?
Sure,
yeah. And so the spiritual gifts that we have, they are being falsified. If it does not exalt Jesus Christ, it is not of God, period. That's a simple thing.
All right. Do you want to take a phone call before we have to wrap it up? I feel like we've went so fast. My goodness. Good morning. Thank you for calling and for waiting. You're on the air with Pastor Snyder.
Pastor Snyder, this is Lauren. I just had to call to tell you, like I'm sure a lot of other people feel, that I just love Sunday mornings and listening to you on the radio. And I just want to thank you so much.
Well, Lauren, thanks so much for calling. I appreciate hearing that from you. I hope it's a blessing to you.
Oh, you are, and thank you again.
Thank you.
So this coming
Bye-bye.
Sunday, I'll be speaking to you particularly.
Oh, I think she hung up.
Wow.
Hopefully she heard that.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, you speak to me, but I mean, I know you're not doing it intentionally, but I some of the things you say, I mean, it's like, wow, it's like, do you know what I'm going through right now? And it applies.
You know what I have learned a long time ago? When I first started in the ministry, I used to preach to people. And I would spend all week preparing a sermon that just fit Larry over there. And I got to church, and guess who wasn't in church that Sunday? So I've given up that kind of
That's
thing.
funny. That's funny. Well, and maybe if you had taken another path in life, you would have been an entertainer, and maybe that gift, or whether that's a gift of the Spirit, I don't know if that applies there, but that you do have that gift. You have that entertainer kind of a pizzazz or
Well, the scripture
charisma.
says, a merry heart doeth good like medicine. And wouldn't you agree with me that we're living in a very sick culture?
My goodness,
and they
yes.
need a lot of laughter. Need the right kind of laughter.
You do it in such a way, though. I mean, you transition in the course of the Sunday Joy program. You transition from, in a tiny little period of time, you transition from this really super serious message with some levity, and then you have a prayer. It's just a wonderful transition the way you do that.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
By the way, for those who don't know, Pastor Snyder used to do his shows on reel-to-reel tape,
Right.
and I was the guy who cut the tape, and it was a pain. Now with this digital stuff, just put it all together.
But you know what they need to understand is this here. You could edit in such a way that you could take a syllable out of a word.
I tried.
You were one of the great editors that
Thank
I've
you
ever
very
known,
much.
ever known.
The king of the razor blade. Thank you. Yeah.
And I really enjoy reading your column every
Well,
week
thank
in the
you,
Marion
thank you.
Citizen, because it's something I always look forward to. You're wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So we're very unfair to the book. We couldn't stop listening to you. One book is My Daily Pursuit, Devotions for Every Day, and this is by A.W. Tozer. So are we giving these away?
Sure. I need to mention the fact that the official website is tozeraw.com. TOZERAW.com.
Okay.
And at that website, you can get all the information, and these books are available in bookstores across the country everywhere.
All right, so let me give away this one, and we do have more than one. So if we have more than one listener, how many do we have? 3?
4.
I got 4.
Four.
I got
4 of them here. So if we have 4 listeners who want them, you're welcome to them. Good morning. You've got one of them. Who's this?
This is Charles.
Charles, you got one of the books. It'll be waiting for you at the mall here, okay?
Gotcha, man. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me give away another one. Good morning. You've got the second book. Who's this?
Larry, this is Judy. I'll have one.
Judy, you've got one. Thank you so much for calling in. It'll be waiting for you. And we've got 2 more. If we have 2 more listeners who would like the books that Pastor Snyder is giving away, and if we don't have the takers, we'll give them away later on.
Great.
Pastor, you are awesome. You are a friend. And when we first moved in here, I'll tell you a little story, everybody. Pastor Snyder came to visit, bring the CD for the show or whatever, and I was walking him out to his truck because he had a lot of books that we had to bring out to the truck. So he said, "How do you like the new place?" And I said, "It's great. We got a big window, lots of scenery." And I said, "But if you were a priest, I'd have to confess. I'd have to ask for redemption because there's a lot of pretty women. I don't think I have pure thoughts every day." So it's kind of funny.
I pray for you every day.
Pastor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
coming in and for being part of our lives.
I appreciate that.
That's
Thank you.
That's the bigger thank you. We will take a break and we will be right back. Damage control is next, right? Damage control. Okay, got it.
Hey, it's Christy with Ocala Mac and PC Repair and Ocala Guest Wi-Fi to let you know we have you covered. We are the only local certified Apple and Microsoft computer company in Ocala. We are family owned and operated. From mobile repair to wireless networks, viruses, new systems, or security cameras, we do it all. Check us out online, ocalamacpc.com, or give us a call, 352-566-8324.
Tell them Nick, Madison, or Mason sent you and get free diagnostic.
Get your internet telephone service from the company that brought affordable internet service to Ocala in the first place. All is Safe is a sister company of Ocala Guest Wi-Fi, a company you've known and trusted for all your internet needs. Whether you need a phone or hundreds, we've got the products and services to meet your needs both now and in the future. Our plans include everything from local and long-distance calling to equipment maintenance and even software upgrades. You can count on All is Safe to give you cost certainty knowing that your bill will be the same next week, next month, or even next year. Call 352-450-8647 today to learn how to cut your monthly telephone bill up to 60%.
Now is the time to take advantage of Florida Credit Union's CD specials. Our 36-month CD comes in at 1.26% APY. A 24-month is working for you at 1.0% APY. And our 12-month at 0.75% APY. All CD rate specials require a $10,000 minimum. With friendly service and rates like these, it's not hard to see why Florida Credit Union has your CD options covered. Florida Credit Union, connecting your money to your life. Call 352-237-8222 for more information.
The 39 Steps. Mysterious comedy or comic mystery? The Hitchcock-inspired spy thriller spoof, The 39 Steps, is fearfully fun from November 7th through December 1st, live on stage at the Ocala Civic Theater. When a woman is found